Welcome, my name is Carolyn Jarvis. I'm one of the MPD Management and Personal Development tutors here. I've been here since 2007 and my background is an emerging markets trader at Deutsche Bank and a school teacher, so I combined the two when I've come here.
Wow.
Yeah. I taught psychology. So yeah, I taught psychology, which is kind of underpins all of the personal development. And so the models that we use are always come from, you know, bona fide, hard, tried and tested research, evidence-based material. So that's a bit, just very quickly about me, because we know we have just an hour and a bit. Would you want to introduce yourselves to each other? Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Well, the CIPD did a study and they found that, that it costs per employee just under £600 per year just managing people who are not being able to manage their workload, not being able to manage the change and the challenges that come up to them. And Mind said that for every £1,000 that is invested in terms of helping people become more resilient and managing their workload, there is a £3,000 sort of payoff. It's something that we really need to address, because the idea of being resilient is not going to sort of fall away. So we're going to look at personal resilience today, but before we start, I thought it might be quite useful. We like to use our workbooks and we also, a lot of what we do is very interactive. If you'd like to take this bit out, I'd like to kind of just think about, first of all, you know, it's a word that's bandied around quite a bit, but on page 1 here, what I'd like you to think about, just to kick off really, is, you know, what is the extent of your knowledge about this topic at the moment? You know, do you have very little knowledge? So you just kind of know the name, just know the title. You've heard the word and you know it's sort of around and about, but you're not that familiar with it. Do you have a reasonable level of knowledge so you could explain a little bit to someone about it in terms of what it involves? Or have you got quite a thorough knowledge? So you might have read quite a bit about it because you're interested in it, or the business is interested in it, so you've taken a bit of step. If we get very little knowledge, we have that as 0, and if we have thorough knowledge as 10, where might you place yourself? Okay, so Madeline, you'd be a 4, fantastic. Okay, right. So would you like to pop that on there, because we'll see at the end if I've done my job, if you can if we increase it. Okay, so what you're saying is you probably know quite a lot more than what you'd say is a 2, but you haven't had it packaged so you can kind of take it away.
Yes.
I've got you. Okay, all right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Right, so what are these people? We've got 4, 2, 3 and 4. What have these people got in common? Nelson Mandela, familiar name, Victor Nilon, Viktor Frankl, Kelly Holmes and Malala Yousafzai. So we all know what Nelson Mandela is all about, don't we? And he was in prison for a huge length of time. He came out and did extremely well for South Africa. Victor Nilon, has anyone heard of him? Interesting man. He was convicted 17 years ago of rape. And he's always claimed that he was innocent. Always claimed he was innocent. After 7 years of being imprisoned, he was offered the opportunity to get out of prison, go on parole, if he said he was guilty. And he said, no, I'm not. I've never been guilty. I wasn't even there. And 17 years later, he's actually come out of jail, and they realised there was DNA evidence to show that he wasn't anywhere near the site. And he's now back in society trying to rebuild his life. Viktor Frankl, have you heard of him? Man's Search for Meaning. It's a fantastic little slim book. It's highly motivational. It's wonderful. Viktor Frankl was a guy who was in the German concentration camps. He was a psychologist as well. And he realised after a short time that he was the only person in his family who had still survived. And he was surrounded by people who were getting very depressed. Obviously, it was an extraordinary situation he was in. And he just wrote his book about the one thing that people couldn't take away from him was his internal dialogue and his choice about how he was going to interpret the situation. And so he says we have the ability to make choices all the time, and he chose not to be brought down by the guards. He decided that because he could think in that way, he had more freedom than the guards, because they were just being told what to do and they didn't use their initiative and they didn't think about it. Whereas he, when he went to bed every night, he used to imagine himself in a lecture theatre giving his lecture to his students and sort of empowered himself like that. Kelly Holmes, why would she be on there? Yes, okay. So she is an Olympic gold medalist twice, so she's got a lot of motivation. Was there anything that she might have had to combat that you're aware of?
Did she have an injury at some point?
I'm sure she did have an injury, yeah. She also got deeply depressed and self-harmed. The challenge of being so good was so overwhelming at certain times that she felt that she wasn't able to cope very well. And Malala, she has. So she is on the forefront of ensuring that education is for all, but particularly for girls. She's out there being very strong. And she's only 14, I think. Extraordinary. All these people have come across adversity, situations that are hugely challenging, and yet they've been extraordinarily successful. So if we tie that into resilience, what would you think resilience, a nice definition of resilience would be? The definition of being able to be resilient is that you have the ability to manage challenges, manage adversity and bounce back. And that's a key phrase really, or key word. And we've got it in our next slide here. Resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or work and financial stresses. It means bouncing back from different situations. The ability to be able to manage a situation so that you're not caught up in it. And that's really difficult, but each of these people have been able to do that. And it starts with your own self-awareness. So we're going to sort of be thinking about your self-awareness and where you are. But let's go back to the slide previously, because I'd like you to just have a look at these. Based on your understanding, and you've got a definition there now that we can explore a little bit more, but which of these statements would you agree or disagree with? So if you put an A by the ones that you agree with, you can do this together if you like, or D if you disagree with them. So, is resilience under your control? What would you say? It is. Okay, right, that's interesting. So you are able to become more resilient. Resilience enables you to achieve at the highest levels of work. Would you say you agree with that or disagree with it? Agree with it, absolutely, because it enables you to retain focus and keep on track and keep motivated when these challenges come to you. Resilient people do not get anxious or stressed. Would you agree with that?
I disagree with that.
Disagree with that, absolutely. They still get anxious, they still get stressed, it's just they have a different coping mechanism. Resilience is of vital importance when making quick and tough decisions in moments of chaos.
I put agree for that.
Yeah? Yes, absolutely. So it enables you to still think clearly. Because when we get really stressed, really anxious, our thinking often jumps around. We get to all the cortisol and stress hormones that come into, and that means our thinking becomes more disparate. But resilient people are able to manage that so that they can still think about alternatives. Resilience is an either-or trait. Either you have it or you don't.
I disagree on that.
Disagree. Yep, absolutely. You can build it, can't you? So we all come with have a certain level, but then you can clearly, yep. And is it determined during your childhood?
Influenced by.
Influenced by, okay.
Yeah,
yes.
heavily influenced by your childhood.
It is, absolutely, because we are born with, there's two different types of stress, trait stress and state stress. Trait is what you are inherently born with. So I might have a lower level of being able to manage things than you. But then there's also state stress, which is what's in the environment that impacts me. And that is where we can alter it and build it, because we can learn how to look at things in a different way. And that's what we're going to look at for the rest of this session, is thinking styles. The ABC of resilience is the thinking styles that we use. It's the foundation for being able to build resilience. And without this session, then you can't go on to the other sessions, because you actually haven't kind of understood or you're not aware of the basic situation. There are 4 pillars of resilience, and they're quite interesting, and these are really important. The first one is that change is possible. Now, if we don't understand and we don't take on board the fact that change is possible, and we don't have an open mind to it, we won't be able to become more resilient. So these 4 absolutely underpin everything. So change is possible. We are open to change. We're happy to change. We're happy to experiment and think about it. Is an absolute necessity in order to be able to build resilience. And some people are unable or unwilling to change their thinking patterns. because we are creatures of habit, and we get into certain mindsets. We feel more comfortable with them, even if they're not actually particularly beneficial for us. We're just used to those. And of course, when we're faced with a challenge or adversity, then we tend to default to what we're used to because it's rather overwhelming. So this is a really important one, in that if we're dealing with people who find change or adversity a challenge, it's getting them to understand that it is possible to change and there are options for you. The second one is that resilience is all about thinking patterns. If we can change the way we think, our cognitive processes, if we can change the way we perceive things, then we're going to be able to become more resilient. It's a bit like a glass that's half full. Some people will say it's half full, some say it's half empty. In a very sort of crass way. It's all about our cognitive interpretation of something. It's something that I might find stressful, some of you might not find stressful. So it's very different. And then the third one is that in order to become more resilient, we need to develop accurate, clear thinking. And that can be quite challenging, and that's what we're going to have a little look at. And the fourth one is knowing yourself. So what are your thinking styles? What are the styles that you have that actually are serving you well? And what are the ones that are actually possibly not doing you so well? All of our thinking styles we get from our childhood, we build them up, and they were all there for a particular reason. All will have a certain level of benefit, but in certain situations they may not transpose very well. So any of the thinking styles that you have are there for a reason, and they did serve you well initially, but so there's nothing that's bad about the way we do it. It's just trying to make sure that we're using the right one at the right time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So how do you feel about those four? You're absolutely right, which is why this is number one. If they're not, people get stuck in a certain mode of thinking, and it's very difficult for them to actually change out of that mode. And that is the challenge, because if you don't have this, the rest of it's not actually going to bed down and be at all effective. Okay, so what are we going to look at? We're going to look at our thinking styles, building our self-awareness. What are our thinking styles? And what are our levels of resilience at the moment? What tips you over the edge? And what drives your thinking patterns during that moment? What are the things? So self-awareness is a key factor, and something that we often just don't take time to reflect on, but we need to sort of think about what are the things that really challenge us. And the ABC, A is for adversity. What are the things that really are like your hot buttons? What are the things that really challenge you? Because you'll find that there are repeated patterns, what they call hot buttons, things that really wind you up. So in order to have a look at this, we've got a lovely handout here. So adversities are challenges, changes, things that really make you, and we call them hot buttons because they fire you with emotion. You feel overwhelmed, really angry, really cross, really, the emotional output is vast. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to have a look at these, and they're on the left-hand side, and then decide how you would rate them. So 5 would be extreme, that you have an extreme reaction to this. 4 is you find it very difficult. 3 is moderate, 2 is somewhat, and 1 is not at all. So conflicts at work with certain colleagues. Now some people are very easy. They can switch off when they leave work and go home and not think about it. Other people wake up in the night still worrying about it and thinking about it. So where would you say you'd be on that? And the key thing about this is to go through it, because there may be patterns that crop up. Okay, once you've done that, if you turn over, because the second task is to look if there are any patterns. Is there a pattern in terms of the certain things, there are certain similarities between the things that are causing you to feel really challenged? Are there certain themes? Is there a certain area of your life? So is it more personal or is it more professional? Or are there certain themes within it in terms of time management or dealing with certain colleagues? Or time pressure? And what are the emotions that you have when you feel you're up at the number 5? Has anything come out from that for you? Or is it all things, everything that you kind of knew about? So you've become more consciously aware of it. fantastic. Okay, all right. So identifying if there are common themes is a key feature of being able to. It's the A in ABC of being able to understand what's kind of really making you feel very challenged. What the situations are, your hot buttons. The second one is beliefs. So it's really interesting because beliefs are what drive our thinking patterns. What beliefs do we have that actually drive our behaviour? And if we think about the next slide here, we have behavioural foundations. So it's like an iceberg. What you see from someone is 1/10. Underneath is 9/10 of the drivers for behaviour. If I draw this up here, if we think about an iceberg like this, then this is what we see, what's shown, what's demonstrated. So that will be someone's body language, it will be their speech, it will be the tone of their voice, the words that they use, but it's everything about that individual that is available for anyone else to see. So it's the outward demeanour of someone. But of course, what drives that is all the things underneath. Well, what are the things would you say are the drivers of how you behave and I behave? What are the things that would sort of make you behave in a certain way at a certain time? So emotions, fantastic, absolutely, your emotions. And that could be simply that you're feeling hungry or that you're feeling quite hot. It doesn't have to be something completely sort of extreme, does it? But it could also be that you feel frustrated. So your emotions is a lovely one, absolutely lovely one, yeah. Okay, so thinking. So what you're thinking, how you're understanding or trying to work out the situation, thinking about the situation. Lovely, okay. What other things would drive the way you behave? So that would be frustration perhaps and hopelessness. Excellent, that comes under emotions, that's lovely, excellent. That's going to mean that we react in a certain way, lovely. Anything else?
Health.
Health, excellent, absolutely, yes. Your health is a big one, isn't it? Yes. So, you know, how fast you can move, even. Very, yeah, absolutely. So the culture, absolutely. Culture is huge, isn't it, in terms of culture is all about what we expect, the norms of behaviour, and so that will drive the behaviour up here as well. And different cultures have different firmly held beliefs. So beliefs would link into that. Absolutely. Yep. Nice. Yes, okay, tell me about that. You're right. Okay, yes, absolutely. So if you're in a place that's very overcrowded and you find that quite overwhelming, that's going to impinge on, yes. Okay, so the environment will dictate the behaviour that you demonstrate. Nice, okay, lovely. Anything else? What about how you were socialised? So as a child, you know, what your parents said to you. The key phrases that you're probably told. I think one of the lovely ones is, you know, don't talk to strangers. And then you get into business and you have to network and you have to that's a key factor. You know, how does that fit? It's totally different, isn't it, from what you say? So how you socialise, which would lead us into gender, isn't it? You know, the stereotypes that we have for genders. And I've got 3 girls, and I decided that there was no such thing as sort of gender stereotypes, and bought them equal amount of boys' toys as girls' toys. They never looked at them. Never looked at them. They went straight to the plastic kitchen, despite the fact there was a garage there with things. So, you know, their gender are sort of hormones and all of the media, etc., make a huge effect on terms of how we behave. Is there anything else that you think would go under there? Education, absolutely. So I was thinking socialised here. We could put education, absolutely, and we could put parents here. So our upbringing, yep. Religion, lovely, excellent. Okay, religion. Fantastic. Okay, so there's a myriad of things that are going underneath the surface at any one time that we're not aware of that is actually driving our behaviour in a certain way. And it's those those beliefs that are under here that we need to start thinking about. Now we've got an inner voice that's constantly talking to us. At the moment, some of you might be thinking, that I'd like another sandwich, but should I get up and get it or not? Or I need a drink, or whatever. You know, it could be anything. Your voice, your inner voice is talking to you at all times. And in adversity, it's identifying what that inner voice is doing is really, really important. What is your thinking style when you are being faced with something that you're finding really challenging? So it's your in the moment ticker tape beliefs, which is the B, which is we're going to have a little look at that, because that's going to be what's driving your behaviour. So there are 4 key types of beliefs and thinking styles in your ticker tape. So there are 2 types that are instrumental in terms of managing adversity and being able to combat it and to be resilient. First one is called causal beliefs, the why beliefs. If you're thinking about why has this happened to me, you're looking back at the past, you're trying to explain why it happened, and you're trying to understand why a situation occurred. Now, in itself, that is very good, because if you can understand why something's happened, then you have the opportunity to prevent it perhaps in the future. So none of these thinking styles are bad, it's just if we tend to focus on one more than the other. So causal beliefs are why beliefs. Why did it happen? How could this have happened? You're trying to understand what's going on. The second one is implication beliefs. So that's looking at the future. So what if? So it's making a premonition about the implications of what's just happened. So you've missed a bus in the morning. And if you had causal beliefs, you'd be saying, you know, why did that happen? Maybe I need to put my alarm clock on 5 minutes earlier. They're always quite unreliable, and you'd work out a way potentially to manage it. If you've got implication beliefs, you'd be the kind of person who'd go, oh, I've missed the bus, that means I'm going to be late for the meeting, that means I'm going to look bad to my team, and you start sort of thinking in terms of the ricochet effect of that particular one event. Implication beliefs. Okay, so have a look at these. What do you think of these 2? Julie is delegating all her unpleasant tasks to me. She's angry because Tom, her manager, didn't like her last idea. What do you reckon that is? Causal. Because attributing it to a cause. Therefore, in the future, because to her manager, it didn't like her last idea, maybe she's going to think about how she can manage presenting her ideas to him in future because it didn't go down well that time. So it's causal. How about the next one? We're not getting along these days. If we can't work it out, the project will never get off the ground and our careers will be shot. Implication, absolutely. Okay, implication. Now, at any one time when you are faced with adversity, there are 2 others that are more neutral, but it's possible that you go to one of these 2. And these are the 2 that cause people more stress and anxiety. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about causal beliefs. So that's on our next slide here. Causal beliefs are really interesting. And this comes from, if any of you are particularly interested, this comes from a guy who's an absolute sort of guru. He's called Seligman. He did a lot of research into positive psychology. He wrote a book called Learned Optimism. And the key thing about learned optimism is that there are 3 P's to it. And I'm going to explain each of these. And then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about, you know, of these 3, do any of these sort of resonate with you? Okay, so the first one is personalisation. Personalisation. So when you attribute an adversity, do you attribute it to yourself or do you attribute it to others? So it's yourself and others, or others. So for instance, let's think about you organise a meeting, you have an agenda, you send the agenda out, and then at the end of the meeting you've only got halfway through, but you really had to get through the whole lot. Would you attribute that to yourself? Oh, I should have run the meeting a bit faster, I should have hurried Victoria on, and I should have made Sarah, I should have stopped her when she was going on for too long. Or would you attribute it to others? Oh, Victoria always talks too long. Sarah never knows what's appropriate and what isn't inappropriate. So do you attribute things that have gone wrong more to yourself? It's not black and white. I can see you, Melis, you're thinking, hang on a minute. It's not just black and white, but on balance, would you attribute it to yourself or to others? So if you say that you're getting to work and the trains are late, would you say, oh, I must make sure I get up earlier, I must make sure I walk faster to the train station, or would you say, oh, British Rail, they're always like that, it's just an absolute pain. Why am I paying all this money?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, so you're others.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's what's quite interesting is that we tend to default to one more than the other. And obviously, it's good to attribute certain things to yourself, because then if you are responsible for them, you can change it. But if you always do, it becomes very negative and you're less resilient. Yeah? Okay, permanence is the second one. Permanence. So do you think that that event is temporary or long-lasting? So is it temporary or long-lasting? So let's give the example of the meeting. So the meeting has, you haven't got through the agenda. If you're someone who takes a temporary view in terms of this permanence, you would say, well, it'll never happen again, it's just a one-off. Normally we get through everything, we will do it again, it was slightly chaotic today. If, on the other hand, you're someone who thinks of it in terms of being permanent and long-lasting, you'd say, this happens all the time. It's dreadful. We can never get through the agendas that we have. You can actually feel the sort of emotional weight already, can't you, just by explaining the two. This one here, the temporary, is a little bit lighter, whereas the long-lasting is much heavier. So your resilience and our emotional tone is an element of being able to manage adversity. Are you okay with that one? Yep. And the last one is pervasiveness. Pervasiveness. Now this is whether that adversity or in that particular challenge is going to spread or is it going to be contained. So is it specific or is it going to spread out? So if it's specific, that meeting on its own you haven't got through the agenda and it's a problem and it's an issue, but it's just that. Whereas if you're spread out, you're going to think that's going to ruin my day. That means that I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z because we haven't got through it, and that means that it's a knock-on effect that's pervasive. It's spreading out, and so the emotional tone and the belief is that it's impinging a wide variety of different things rather than being contained. If you always say it's yourself, then you're going to become the one who you're going to feel guilty, you're trapped, totally overwhelming. Equally, if you always say it's others, you're not taking responsibility for anything. So the key thing about this is identify you will have a preference to do one more than the other, and that's fine, that's great, but is that standing you in good stead in times when you are feeling challenged? So if your default is that it's yourself and you have a huge challenge, then being aware that you generally attribute it to yourself means that you can actually think of alternatives. Actually, maybe there are other things that came into play here that means that it's not actually just about me. And that broadens your outlook. And that's the key thing here, is trying to broaden your perspective so that it's not attributable to smaller things, narrower things that make you feel dreadful. So let's have a look at the next slide, because I've done a few for you. Because, of course, we mix these up. There's not just one on its own, we mix them up. So let's have a look at these. If we've got, we use the three. We use the self, we use fleeting, temporary, and we use specific. If the printer's collapsed, it's not working, it's broken, then you'd say the printing error was my fault, but it won't happen again. It was my fault, which is self, it's fleeting, it won't happen again, and it was very specific, it's an error. If you were using self, permanent and specific, you'd say the printing error was my fault again. I just can't seem to make it work. So it's permanent. It happens again and again and again. If you were, using self, fleeting and spreading widely or pervasive, you'd say all the printing errors on this project were my fault. Or this is what your ticker tape beliefs, that's what you'd be thinking. And if you're thinking of self, permanent and spreading widely, you'd say I'm responsible for all the errors. The same event, but different ways of thinking about them. And of course, that's going to affect the way you react to others and your behaviour. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've got 4 down the bottom that are different. So I'd like you to work in groups, in your table groups if you'd like. What would be the thinking behind those 4, other, fleeting and specific? what are the ticker tape beliefs that would be going through your mind if you chose those other combinations on the bottom? Okay, right, so we've got a problem with the problem with the printer, and we're going to attribute it. Our ticker tape is going to say that it's other, fleeting and specific. Anyone want to give me an offer of what their thinking pattern would be saying to them at the time? So it's Justina's pulse, it was other. It won't happen again, it's fleeting, and specific, a printing error. Okay, yep, fantastic. We could make it even more specific, couldn't we? So we could say the printing error was due to Justina not replacing the ink cartridge, which has been fixed now. Okay, fantastic. How about other, permanent and specific? Okay, so we go, the printing error was due to Justina not replacing the ink cartridge, which has been severely damaged. Okay. So it's other, Justina, it's permanent because it's been severely damaged, and it's specific because it's the ink cartridge. Does that make sense? How about other, fleeting and spreading widely? Justina didn't replace the ink cartridge, which also affected the cogs and wheels, but all is fine now. So it's fleeting, it's spreading widely, so it spread to the cogs and wheels. I couldn't think of what else goes in a printer. And then finally was other, permanent and spreading widely. So you'd say Justina didn't replace the ink cartridge, which also affected the cogs and wheels and will affect the other aspects of the machine. Does that make sense to you all? Okay, are there any of those that you think you use more than others? And you don't have to share it, you can talk to each other, don't have to share it with me, but I'll give you 1 minute. Of the 3 Ps, which of those would you say or the combinations, do you see either in yourself, or there may be someone who you work with which is very obvious? Sometimes it's easier to identify thinking patterns in other people rather than ourselves. Okay, so we've got our causal beliefs we've had a good look at there. So now we've got causal beliefs, we've got implication beliefs, looking at the past, looking at the future. We've also got 2 others. One is called narrative and one is called evaluative. So the narrative is when you are just going through your head about you're telling the story. You're it's like a film of what happened, what's happening now. You're going through your head, just talking to yourself about what's going on. It's very objective. Very rarely is it too emotional. Or evaluative is the last one, where you've weighed up the pros and cons about the situation, and therefore you come to some kind of a conclusion about what's going on. So you've looked at both sides. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to think about these examples here. We've got 5 different examples of ticker tape speeches. Which ones represent causal, implication, narrative or evaluation? Okay, so the first one is John and I are arguing again. It's our 5th argument this week. We just seem to argue and argue and argue. So would you say that's causal, implication, narrative or evaluation? Narrative. It's just saying what's happened. Absolutely. Fantastic. Number 2, Susan isn't answering my emails because I disagreed with her during the meeting. Evaluation. Evaluation? Okay. Causal, because it's got because. You're attributing it to something because. So the pause means that it is causal. Anything else you'd like to say about that one? We know there are three Ps. So we know with causal there's permanence, pervasiveness and personalisation. So Susan didn't answer my emails because I disagreed with her during the meeting. Self, very self, isn't it? So it's attributing it to yourself because it's your problem. Now, is that the case? Who knows? Is it permanent or specific? Specific to the meeting. Is it pervasive? It's not clear there, is it? No, it's not clear. But it's clearly very personal. Okay, number 3. I've messed up again. I get so easily distracted, I continually miss deadlines. It's bound to happen again and again. Is that causal, implication, narrative or evaluation? Causal, okay. Causal is what's happened in the past. Implication is the implications for the future. I'd say it's implications. Because you've messed up, you get easily distracted, it's bound to happen again and again. You've taken it, you've made it affect the future. So there are implications. The success of these large projects relies on teamwork. If we don't demonstrate teamwork well in this pitch, we'll lose not only this piece of work, but also any going forward. What would you say that is? Evaluation. Okay. The success of these large projects relies on teamwork. If we don't demonstrate teamwork well in this pitch, we'll lose not only this piece of work, but also any going forward. Implications, because it's because also going any further forward, you'll lose not only this, but also any other. So there is this particular event will have an impact on future events. And how about next time we write a proposal, we must allow more time. Evaluation, absolutely. So you've evaluated the situation and you've come to a conclusion. Now, when you're in a state of adversity, when a challenge has come to you, of those 4 there, do you think you know which one you're most likely to use? If you are more likely to use causal or implication, that's when your resilience is slightly lower. Obviously, they're useful in certain situations, but not if they're your kind of default for those situations. It's interesting, if you start thinking about what your ticker tape's saying, we often don't think about it, but you know, which do you generally use? I had a client, we often see clients repeatedly because we come across them from different courses, and this one particular client, he said that he hadn't realised that actually he's 90% narrative. 90% narrative, so he doesn't evaluate, doesn't do implication or causal, but then he started thinking, well, maybe it would be useful for me to use these other styles occasionally, and so started stopping. And what they say is that you should actually have like a beeper test, so that intermittently throughout the day, regardless of whether you're feeling particularly stressed or challenged at the time, you should just stop and think, right, what is my head telling me? Am I using any of these styles, and are they the best style to use at this particular time? So it's gaining awareness, self-awareness, and that's what this knowledge bite is about. It's the first step to building resilience. ABC is gaining awareness about how you're thinking when you are put under a great deal of challenge, and is that thinking serving you well? I'm very aware when I get really stressed and I have to just take time out, because my natural instinct is to just do something, and that might not be the best course of action.
Right.
So I have to stop. So it's the emotion. I'm aware of the emotion. I stop, and then I have to work it backwards to think about what's my ticker tape doing, what do I need to do to make sure to be more evaluative. Generally, is this, I've often jumped to the conclusion, oh, he did it because of this, or she did it because of that. Is that correct? Generally, it's not. There are other factors that I haven't necessarily thought about or maybe unaware of, so I need to go and kind of check out before I send that email. Or they say that it takes 3 months really to create a new habit, but that's just so general, because it depends how frequently it occurs. If it occurs once every month, then you're not going to be able to create that new habit. If you're someone who feels that you are challenged on a daily basis, and you're implementing this on a daily basis, then I would say 3 months is about the right time.
Dealing with it daily.
Yes.
Wow, so it's a lot of practice.
It's a lot of practice. That's why new habits, that's why behavioural change is just such a challenge, because any of the things, if we try to isolate them, they don't happen repeatedly, especially if we're thinking about these negative ones. Hopefully someone's not facing it every single day, so that it may take longer for them to, and that's why we need triggers, so things to remind ourselves that when it comes, we're going to act in this slightly different manner. We're going to stop and pause and think. We could be an outlook that you're reminded every week, every day for the first week, and then every week, and then every 2 weeks, stretching it out because you're more aware of it. Could be a little icon on your desk, or you tell someone who you sit next to, because you're both trying to work on the same thing. Right. Something that's a visual or an auditory or some kind of reminder. But habits tend to have a cause, and it's they call them triggers. So you respond because of something. That's why looking at your adversity, what are the hot buttons? If you know what they are, you can then arm yourself. So say perhaps it's a particular individual who you're working with. If you know and you've isolated that it's that person who actually does tend to wind you up for whatever reason, and you're going to their meeting, you can actually, right, okay, I'm going to manage that more effectively this time. I'm going to take, I don't know, whatever it might be, and I'm going to press it hard so all my sort of emotion goes out there and doesn't come out through my mouth. So it's being aware of what are the triggers, which is why we did the A bit. Are there patterns there? The A, the adversity, is the things that really wind you up. Now, I'm going to give you a sheet of paper at the end that you can take away with you. But one of the key factors when you identify those, when you try to work out what the ticker tape beliefs are and what the consequences are, is that you need to write them down in an objective manner. That can be so challenging because it may well be, if I use that meeting example, that I'm so emotional that I actually start attributing what happened to particular people rather than just saying, the meeting lasted an hour, we should have been able to, we did not get through all of the agenda points. It has to be completely objective, because then you can look at not only the beliefs that were underneath it and the consequences, but you can then start addressing, and that's what the rest of the course would do, is how do you manage and mitigate and deal with causal beliefs, and how do you manage and mitigate for implication beliefs. So what we need to do, we've done A, we've had a quick look at B. Now we need to make the link between B and C, because the link between B and C is the consequences are the actions that you take, the emotions that you feel. So let's have a quick look at that. Right, we have on the left-hand side we have the beliefs, and on the right-hand side we have the consequences. So if that challenge has violated your rights, that's the way that you think, the freedom that you think you have, then that would turn to anger. An example would be that someone says, I can't even decide when to take a break. So your manager has told you that you have to have a break at a certain time, or you can't have a break. You know, that's a sort of freedom of thought, isn't it? A really great example of that one was when a friend of mine was invited to a wedding, and they all had to stay in a particular hotel. So they had to pay a particular amount of money. And she was really angry. I can decide where I want to stay. So it's a violation of her rights, her ability. Now, interestingly, quite a lot of managers will micromanage people. And when they do that, that actually can lead to anger, because it's a violation of what that individual feels is their right to be able to make choices over doing certain things. The second one is the belief of real-world loss or loss of self-worth. So our example here is, clients don't like my suggestions, I guess I'm not as smart or talented as I thought. So that would lead, because clients haven't liked their suggestions, would lead to sadness or depression. A more sort of apt one right at the moment is, have any of you repeatedly given yourself something that you're going to give up for Lent or a New Year's resolution? I imagine certain people have done, and if you haven't actually been able to follow those through, then you'd have a slight loss of self-worth, which would lead to sadness. The third one is a violation of another's rights. So this is interesting. If you feel guilty if you've violated someone else's rights. So you might pass someone as they're drinking their Red Bull in the office, and you say, that's your 4th Red Bull of the day. And then you go past and you think, oh, of course she can do what she likes, or he can drink what she likes. What did I do that for? And you feel guilty about it afterwards, which will lead to certain consequences. A future threat, this is a publicity, lots of media sort of breed on this, don't they? Is that I'll never get this all done, John will think I'm incompetent, anxiety and fear. So don't go out at night, because you get so much publicity about the fact that dark is dangerous, and therefore you get anxious, fearful, and don't do it. Or negative comparison to others is the last one, which is our fifth one, is my friends are doing much better in their careers than me. That leads to embarrassment. These are the consequences, the emotions that cause us to lose resilience. They are not bolstering us, they're not helping us. They're all negative emotions that are pulling us down, and they're not enabling us to be at our best and perform at our best and think most clearly and make the right decisions for the situation that we're in. Consequences. The A is our adversity, B is our ticker tape beliefs, and C are the consequences. That's feelings, the emotions that we've just had a quick peek at, and then, of course, because of those emotions, there'll be certain behaviours. Consequences are the way you feel and what you do in the moment of an adversity or challenge. So take a moment to think about your in-the-moment emotions. What do you generally, are there certain emotions of those ones, sadness, anger, embarrassment, guilty, are there certain ones that you are aware that you're feeling more regularly than others in the workplace? Do you act in the same way over and over again? And if you think about your emotions over a week, is there one that's more prevalent than another? Gaining self-awareness. Is that triggered by the same sort of adversity or family of adversities? So, do you repeat certain behaviours over and over again? Do you procrastinate all the time and then you feel guilty because you've violated someone else's rights because you should have done it? Do you give in too easily? Do you stay in your comfort zone so you don't actually not stretching yourself and achieving the goals that you really want to achieve? So C is a little bit about the output as a result of the input, the interpretation and the output. How can you reflecting on that to see if it's what the triggers are so you can get a better output. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've got four scenarios to put this all together. So what I'd like you to do is think about the adversity, the beliefs and the output here. So Jane works in marketing. One of the big draws of the company was that they marketed themselves as being family friendly and flexible. I'm going to let you read these. So what's the adversity? Being as objective as possible, just saying what it is, no emotion. Then what do you think are the beliefs that are underpinning it, and therefore what are the consequences? Okay, so should we have a look at the first one? So Jane, working in marketing. What did you think about that one? So she's got causal beliefs, hasn't she? Very much so there. Yeah. And that's led to, feels there's a loss of control, so there's anger.
Yeah.
Do you feel sadness as well? Her identity as a good partner has been compromised by this because she isn't going to be able to go home.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's not taking her partner's needs very seriously. That's he might think, so she might feel guilty. So there's as a result of this scenario, she's likely to feel angry, she's likely to feel a bit sad, and she's likely to feel a bit guilty. So what I've got here for the final thing is a handout here for you if you would like to use this, either to take it away with you, but this is just a great sort of handout in terms of trying to identify, you're welcome, your ABCs, which is the bedrock, the foundation for being able to build resilience. So you need to think of an adversity that's occurred to you. You're welcome to stay and do this now if you'd like to. What's happened to you that you found really challenging recently? But the key thing about the A is that you have to describe it objectively. Strip the emotion out. What just happened? If you were to tell the story in terms of what happened? No emotion, no interpretation, just what happened. Then you have to think about what were the ticker tape beliefs that were going on in your head at that time. Okay, so that takes us to the end of our knowledge bite. It's a few minutes after 2. What if you had the rest of the course, if we were to go on, would look at the sort of cognitive biases that we have. So do we generalise, do we maximise, do we minimise? Look at that. We'd then look at how can you manage causal beliefs. So there's strategies to be able to do that, and we then look at strategies to look at implication beliefs, so that people were armed with the ability to manage any adversity significantly better than before. But this morning, or this afternoon, this has just been a quick glimpse at the very first start of gaining self-awareness. So the adversity is about what are your hot buttons? What are the things that really wind you up? Then we looked at the beliefs, so what is driving you to feel that way? We looked at 4 different types of beliefs, and then we looked at the link between that and the consequences in terms of the emotions that it brought up, the beliefs engendered, and therefore the behaviours.